Hi, my name is Abby, and today I'm presenting my poster on the Supreme Court case, which is the PGA Tour Incorporated versus Martin, which was decided in 2001. This case deals with disability rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act and how those rights apply in professional sports. The facts of this case involve Casey Martin, a professional golfer who has a degenerative circulatory disorder that makes it extremely painful and dangerous for him to walk long distances. Walking the course could permanently worsen his condition. Even though Martin qualified to compete in PGA Tour events, the PGA Tour had a rule requiring players to walk during competition. Martin requested to use a golf cart as an accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA. The PGA Tour denied his request, arguing that walking was an essential part of the game and that allowing a cart would give him an unfair advantage. Martin then sued the PGA Tour, claiming they violated ADA by refusing to provide a reasonable accommodation. The main legal questions before the court were whether the ADA applies to professional golf tournaments and whether allowing Martin to use a golf cart would be a reasonable accommodation or would instead fundamentally alter the nature of the sport. In other words, the court had to decide if providing access for a disabled athlete outweighed the PGA Tour's interest in enforcing its walking rule. The holding, which was the Supreme Court decision, they ruled in 7-2 in favor of Martin. The court held that the PGA Tour is covered by the ADA, a place of public accommodation, and that allowing Martin to use a golf cart was a reasonable accommodation. The court concluded that using a cart would not fundamentally alter the game of golf because the skill of the sport lies in shot making and not walking. In the majority opinion, the court emphasized that the ADA requires individualized consideration and not blanket rules. The justices noted that fatigue from walking is not a significant factor in determining success in golf, especially compared to skill and precision. They also pointed out that golf carts were already allowed in certain qualifying rounds, which weakened the PGA Tour's argument that walking was essential. Because Martin still had to follow all the same rules and compete under the same conditions, the accommodation did not give him an unfair advantage. The dissenting opinion, written by Justice Scalia and joined by Justice Thomas, argued that courts should not interfere with how sports organizations define their own rules. Scalia believed that deciding what is essential to the game of golf should be left to the PGA Tour and not the judges. He warned that this decision could open the door for courts to second-guess the rules of other sports. This case is important because it made clear that professional sports organizations must comply with the ADA. It reinforced the idea that disability rights apply even at the highest levels of competition, as long as accommodations do not fundamentally change the activity. In conclusion, PGA Tour Incorporated versus Martin shows how the Supreme Court balanced fairness, inclusion, and tradition. The court ultimately decided that equal access and reasonable accommodations were more important than rigid enforcement of rules that excluded qualified individuals with disabilities. Thank you for listening.